Good evening. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Metzia Daf Gimel. A little bit of a not terribly difficult Gemara, but a thicker Amud base, a smaller Kufiyad Amud Aleph. We're going to be a little bit behind tonight, but Emir Hashem will catch up. As you can see, Shabbos's blot is short on the Amud base, so I've just kind of broken it up a little differently than I would have ideally broken them up, but it'll work out timing wise. So today will be a drop behind. By the end of Shabbos, we'll be all caught up or close to it. We're starting at a fresh Mishnah on Kufiyad Gimel Amud Aleph, about a quarter of the way down. I'm just going to read one pasuk. The pasuk is quoted on the side of the Gemara, if you have the psukim there. And the pasuk reads, Ki sashevereacha masas me'uma lo savo el beso la'avot avoto. What this pasuk is talking about is that let's say that I borrow money from you. And in order to ensure that you will be comfortable with the loan, you take a collateral from me. When I come to collect that collateral, I'm not allowed to go into your house. It's not allowed. So says the Gemara. And that is the din that we're dealing with. We have to give the scope and the gedarim as to what that actually means. So the Mishnah opens like this. Hamal ve'es chavero, if there's a loan and you have an item of mine that you held as collateral for the loan that you gave me. So the halacha is, lo yimshachnenu ela bebezdin. I can't recollect my own item, my collateral that you're holding. You're the lender. You lent me money. I can't recollect it without Bezdin playing a role. And I'm certainly not allowed to go into your house in order to take that which is mine. Shene'emar, as the pasuk says, bachutz ta'amod. This is yet another pasuk in Chumash. This pasuk reads like this: bachutz ta'amod ve'aish asher ata noshebo. The guy who lent you the money, yotzi elecha es ha'avot hachutza. He'll bring you your item outside. So Lidina, there's an Isser Deoraisa. If you lent me money and I gave you a collateral to guarantee the loan, if I go into your house to take that item, I have done an Isser Deoraisa, possibly, we'll see soon, a double Isser Deoraisa. So says the Gemara. So the Mishnah continues on the third line of the Mishnah. Hayulo shnei kelim. If the items that you're holding that represent my loan, the collateral that's equal to my loan, is two of them. No tel echad umeniach echad. I'm allowed to have one at a time, right? You don't have to have both. You just need to have one. And if the items that you're using are timely, if you have my pillow, you have to give it back to me at night. If you have my plow, you have to give it back to me during the day. So even if you're holding my mashkon in order to guarantee the loan, but you still need to make sure that I have access to those things when I need them. If the person died, namely, if the borrower died, and therefore the mashkon, which belonged to the borrower, that's now in the property of the lender, what does the lender do with that mashkon? The Gemara says, Eino machzer liyorshav. No, the lender gets to keep it. Rashba Gomer, Afla Atzmo, Eino machzer ela ad shloshim yom. Even when the lender is giving it back to the borrower, he's giving it back because, as we said, he needs the pillow at night, he needs the plow during the day. All of that only lasts for 30 days. However, umishloshim yom ulahalan mochran bebezdin. Then he is allowed to sell it through Bezdin in order to get the cash value. Now, there's a lot in this Mishnah that is unclear, and we're going to be spending some time today trying to clarify that. We'll be learning this all the way up until the top of Kufiyad Daled Amud Aleph on the second line, which is where we're going to stop. We won't be done pulling apart this Mishnah. There's quite a bit of Gemara here, and the Mishnah doesn't end. Oh, I should say the Gemara doesn't end until Kuf Tezvav, so we have a little bit of work to go. So let's continue now with the Gemara. Omar Shmuel, we had just said a din in our Mishnah, based on the pasuk, that I, as the love, am not allowed to go into your property to take back the mashkon. So the Gemara says as follows: Omar Shmuel, shliach bezdin mintach netuche in, aval mashkune lo. When it comes to a shliach bezdin, the pasuk's talking about me, the love. I borrowed, I gave you collateral. It's usher for me to go into your property. Okay, but what about a shliach bezdin? Shmuel is trying to extend what we've learned to another person. Okay, so I'm the love. I borrowed from Tex. Tex is the lender, and I gave Tex collateral. My father is actually a shliach bezdin. It's usher for me to go to Tex's property. What if my father is a shliach bezdin? What does he then do? Can he take the property from Tex? Can he go into Tex's property? So Shmuel tries to give a psak. Omar Shmuel, we're halfway down Kufiyad Gimel Amud Aleph. Shliach bezdin mintach netuche in. He is allowed to take the item from text because that's something we said in the Mishnah already, that lo yimshachnenu ela bebezdin. So this is a shliach bezdin. He has rishus to take it, and therefore he can take it from text, no problem. However, aval mashchune lo. But there's some funky languages in today's Gemara. Mashchune in this case means that you can't go into the property. If my father is a shliach bezdin, my father can't go into Tex's house to take that property. And now the Gemara is going to ask 4 questions, which will bring us to the next Amud. 4 questions on the sheet of Shmuel. So let's review the sheet of Shmuel so that we have it clear, and then we'll be able to pressure test it. He wanted to say that a shliach bezdin is allowed to take the loan, take the collateral from Tex as long as Tex is not in his house. But the shliach bezdin is not allowed to go into Tex's house. Says the Gemara, question number 1. V'hatnan, we have a Mishnah. Hamal ve'eschaveru lo yimshachnenu ela bebezdin. What does it say? The Mishnah says that when it comes to a loveh, that the loveh is not allowed to take back the collateral unless it's with rishus bezdin. What does that imply? Michlal de bebezdin mishachninan. That implies that if a person is functioning with the permission of bezdin, then he would even then be allowed to go into the house of the malveh to collect the collateral, which in our case means that my father could go into Tex's house against his will and take back the collateral because my dad's a shliach bezdin. So therefore, we see that Shmuel's wrong, because there's a diuk from our Mishnah that says that if we do have the permission from bezdin, if it is a shliach bezdin, then most definitely he is allowed to go into the home of Tex. So says the Gemara, Amar le Shmuel, that diuk is not necessarily correct. Shmuel says, Ema lo yintachenu ela bebezdin. What he meant to say is that the rishus that the shliach needed was just to grab it out of Tex's hands when he's not in his house. That's what we need permission for. But you're not able to make a diuk about whether or not you can go into Tex's home, only as to whether or not you're allowed to take it from Tex when he is not in his home. And hachanami mistabra, this is actually logical. Why? Diktani seifa, because the end of our Mishnah at the top of the page said, Lo yikanes lebeso litol mashkono, that one is not allowed to go into a person's home to collect their mashkon. So says the Gemara, money. Who are we talking about? Ilema balchov. If we're talking about the loveh, the person who actually owns the item, meresha shemamina, that we already saw. Elalav, it must be that it's talking about a shliach bezdin, and therefore there's no raya as to how to learn the Mishnah that we saw at the open of our Gemara, the question that was asked against Rava, which is really our Mishnah, because there's more than one way to be medayik in our Mishnah. So therefore we asked and we answered, and the question is not valid. The Gemara says, Shmuel, your rejection is not so good, and maybe the claim is actually a good claim. Why? Imishumha. If what you're saying is that there's 2 ways to learn the Mishnah, that's how Shmuel wriggles out of this problem, lo iria. That's not a good argument. Why not? Because perhaps we can say that hachi ka'amar. Really, the Gemara on the side here says in the Hagos Habach, it should say chasure mechzera v'hachi ktanish. Right? It's a little bit of a difference. It's not a taich that the Gemara is making on its own. It's a rewording of not all chasuri mechzeras are actually retooling a Mishnah. Some of them are just to reframe. But here the Gemara went out of its way, the Bach, I should say, went out of its way to say that really this is a chasure mechzera, and here's the right way to read our Mishnah, 2/3 of the way down. Hamal ve'es chavero. If I lend money, if Tex lends me money, lo yimshachnenu ela bebezdin, so then I am not allowed to recollect my collateral from Tex unless it's with rishus from bezdin. Michlal, that implies, de bebezdin mishachnim, that through bezdin we are allowed to even go into Tex's property and take out the collateral. Ubalchova filu nituche namilo. However, when it comes to me, the lova, yes, a shliach bezdin is allowed to do that. But when it comes to me, the person who actually borrowed, that we have a double standard, not a double standard, we have a double isser. There we say that ubalchova filu nituche namilo, even if Tex is in public and he's holding my collateral, I can't take it even in public. Why? So that we don't end up in a scenario where the lova is going to violate the isser in the pasuk of lo savo el beso la'avot avoto. So that's what the Gemara says. All right, so now let's ask question number 2. Question number 2 against Shmuel. Remember, Shmuel said that a shliach bezdin can grab the item, but that the shliach bezdin cannot go into Tex's home to collect the collateral. Masiv Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef brings a brisa. The brisa opens with a pasuk. Lo yachbol rechaim v'rechev. The halacha is that you are not allowed to you're not allowed to go into the home of a person and take back the collateral if it's rechaim v'rechav. What's implied from this brisa? Says Rav Yosef, hadvar macherim choval. But when it comes to other items that are not a rechaim and that are not a rechav, then you are allowed to go into the person's house. That's a big problem because that's against Shmuel. Shmuel said the shliach bezdin is not allowed to go in. This brisa seems to say that you are. And the Gemara continues with this brisa. It also says lo sachbol beged almana. You also can't, if there's collateral in the home of an almana, you cannot go into the almana's home and take the beged. That's not allowed. What's implied? But if we were talking about a non-almana's person, that their clothing, and that's the collateral, then seemingly halacha l'maisa, the shliach bezdin should be allowed to go in, kasha on Shmuel. So the Gemara says 8-9 lines from the bottom of the page. Man, who are we talking about in this Isser and Chumash? Inema, Balchov. If you want to say we're talking about me, the Love, who borrowed from text, and I'm just going back to get my collateral. Haksiv, I don't need a brisa for that. The pasuk in Chumash is black on white. It says lo savo el beso la avot avoto ela lav. It must be, what is the pasuk talking about? Shliach bezdin. And we see that when it comes to scenarios where the item that's being watched is not a rechaim or rechav, or if it's not a woman who is an almana, then I'm allowed as a shliach bezdin, or my father in this case is a shliach bezdin, he's allowed to go in and take that property. Kasha and Shmuel. Says the Gemara. Tir Gemara Papa Bered Rav Nachman Kamed Rav Yosef. Rav Papa explained in front of Rav Yosef, the Amri La, Rav Papa Bere de Rav Yosef, Kame de Rav Yosef. Interesting possible differences, that this Rav Papa might be a different Rav Papa. The Rav Papa in the first version was the son of Rav Nachman. The Rav Papa in the second version is the son of Rav Yosef talking to his father and learning. Tati, it's a different relationship. So says the Gemara, how do we answer up these cases? Le'olam bebalchov. Whoa, this is really powerful. Remember, David, I told you the article I wanted to write about Lav or betray Lavin? We got 2 in 2 days, or in 3 days. So it says the Gemara, La'olam bebalchov. Really, this brisa, the pasuk that speaks about lo sachbol beged almana, lo yachbol rechaim v'rechev, why do we need any of that? We already have the pasuk of lo savo el beso lavot avoto. Says the Gemara, we are talking about the Balchov. We're not talking about a Shlech, and there's no Kasha and Shmuel. We already have the pasuk already from Chumash, from Dvarim Chav Daled Yud, which says, Lo Savo El Beso Lavot Avoto, V'lav or Alav B'shnei Lavin. Now I'm really getting more intrigued. Why this? Here, by the way, it's even less severe than usual because it's actually my item. The Torah has restricted me from going in to collect my mashkon from text. And it did it multiple times. Why are we so makbid? Okay, good. Articles forthcoming after 2027. 3 lines from the bottom. The question number 3 that we have on Shmuel, Tashma. We have a brisa. Mimashma shenemar bachutz ta'amod. Once we know that I, the love, when I go to collect my mashkon from text, that I have to be outside, once we know that, don't we know that text has to come outside? What do you think is going to happen? Miracles are going to happen. The mashkon is going to float out the window. Pashat not. So why then does the pasuk continue? It must be the Rabbo Shliach Bezdin to say that a Shliach Bezdin is allowed to go into his house. And my lav Shliach Bezdin kilove. Wouldn't we then say that the Shliach Bezdin is like the Love in this particular case? So it says the Gemara, Lo, you've misunderstood. Top of Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis. And as mentioned, we're going to go to the top of Kuf Yud Daled Amud Aleph. Lo, Shliach Bezdin Kimalve. And there's a Rashi over here that basically explains that we have to reread our basic understanding of the pasuk. Rashi says on the top of the page, Dibur Hamaskal, Lo, Shliach Bezdin Kimalve. V'hachi Kamar. B'chutz Tamod, Ata v'ha'ish. You and the other person, the love and who, shu shleach bezdin, v'asher tanosha bo yotzei lech. I'm going to reread of the pasuk. Fine. Tashma, question number 4 on Shmuel. Im chavol tachbol salmas re'acha. This, the pasuk says that we, that's not correct what I wrote in my notes. Im chavol tachbol salmas re'acha. If a person goes in, which means you're not allowed to go in to get your coat or your garment that you have, that is a collateral. B'shliach bezdin akosum medaber. This is mefurash brisa, exactly against Shmuel. Shmuel said the shliach bezdin can't go in. This brisa, black on white, says b'shliach bezdin akosum medaber. Ata omer b'shliach bezdin akosum medaber o enu ela bebalchov. Who says maybe we're talking about the love? Says the Gemara, we can't be talking about the balchov because ksho omer lo savu el beso lahavit avoto. That when the pasuk says that he's not allowed to go in, ari balchov amor amani mekayim im chavot tachbol salmas reacha. Bishleach Bezdin Akasim Medaber Kashan Shmuel yet again. And finally, the Gemara acquiesces and recognizes that this sugya is a little bit more broad than we thought. It's not just Shmuel's shita. Shmuel is paskening based on a machlokes tanaim. He's paskening that yes, a shleach bezdin is allowed to take the collateral out of tax's hand when he's not in his house. But Shmuel says you're not allowed to go into the house of that person. What are the two sides of this coin? A bit of a lengthy brisa. Tanoihi. In fact, you're right. Some of your questions are good, and maybe we would then have to go back and relearn how Shmuel would learn all the previous brisas in light of this. Because it could be that we only explained them the way that we did to show that they weren't a slam dunk as to how they should be learned. We'd have to relearn them, which we can't do now. But let's see what the actual machlokas tanaim is. Tanoihi. Titania, the brisa writes as follows. Shliach bezdin shebala mashkano. If you have a shliach bezdin, my dad goes to collect a collateral from tax. Lo yikanis lebeso lamashkano ela omed bachutz. My father, who is a shliach bezdin, is not allowed to go into Tex's home to collect the collateral. V'hala motzi lo mashkon, and Tex has to go outside of his house with the collateral to return it to my father, or as a shliach bezdin, he has to return it. Shenemar bechutz ta'amod v'ha'ish. Why? Because the pasuk says that I have to stand outside as the love, or in this case, my father as the shliach bezdin has to stand outside. Tex, as the lender who is holding my collateral, has to bring the collateral outside. The Tanya Idach, all that's brisa number one. All of that is Shmuel. But brisa number two is where we see what the fourth question indicated, that there's a different din in regards to a shliach bezdin. Balchov shebala mashkano. Let's say I, the love, went to go collect my mashkon from Tex. Lo yikanis lebeso lemashkano. I'm not allowed to go into Tex's home to collect the collateral. Ela omed bachutz. I have to stand outside. Remember, we're talking about me, the love, not my father, the shliach bezdin. V'hala nichnas umotzi lo mashkono. And the other person can go in and get it. Shene'amar b'chutz ta'amod. U'shliach bezdin shebala mashkeno. But what if there was a shliach bezdin? Harei ze nichnas lebeso umemashkeno. Oh, so now we have an explicit shita that when it comes to the world of a shliach bezdin, Harei ze nichnas lebeso umemashkeno, he is taka, allowed to go in. So what we see now is that Shmuel's comment at the open of our Gemara, that a shliach bezdin is allowed to take back the collateral when it's out in public, but that the shliach bezdin is not allowed to go into Tex's home to collect the collateral on my behalf. All of that is Shmuel within one track in the Tanaim, and Shmuel's paskening like that shita. But this second brisa, the Tanya Idach that we just saw, is very, very clear that the shliach bezdin is allowed, with rishus of bezdin, he is allowed to go into Tex's home and take back the collateral. Very good. Now we're going to continue with this second brisa, even though we've already explained what we needed to explain. We've learned now there's a machlokes tanaim about whether or not a shliach bezdin is allowed to be nichnas lebeso shel malve. The Gemara continues a quarter of the way down. V'lo yimshachnenu dvarim she'osin bohen ochel nefesh. Fascinating din. We might have thought that I, as the love, can give Tex any collateral from my house. It's not true. You don't give the mix master on the day that you're making challah. You don't give the one pot that you have. That's not right. It's using the phrase of ochel nefesh in an abnormal way. When we say ochel nefesh, we think hilchos yantiv. But here he's saying, no, the things that you use to cook, do not give those up as collateral. You have no obligation to do that. Give something else. The no saying mita, we also have to make sure that this person has a bed. Umita umatza la'ashir. He needs to have two beds, one regular bed and a bed with fancy sheets for a wealthy person, or mita umafatz la'ani, or a bed with a hay mattress for a poor person. And also, lo, it should only be that these things are available to the love himself. Aval lo leishto v'lo lebanav v'livnosav kederach shemesadrin lebalcho kach mesadrin be'erachin. That he's not allowed to use these items for his wife and for his kids. They're only for him. And in the same way that we're misader for a balchov, the same way, and the Rishonim explain over here that what do we mean misadrin? What it means is that, let's say that I owe money and I don't have enough money. We come up with a payment plan, or we agree to pay less. We figure it out. Kach mesadrin be'erchen. We do the same thing with erchen. If a person makes a commitment to pay based on the values in the Torah, a man of a certain age costs X, a woman of a certain age costs Y, a child of a certain age costs A, whatever the different numbers are. That's by erchen. The Gemara, really just a side note, says, Klape laya. You've structured this wrong. You said kederach shemesadrin lebal chov, kach mesadrin be'erchen. But really, ikar sidur be'erchen ksiv. Really, the first adjustments that we make are by erchen. So you've got it wrong. Elaima, you're right. We wrote that line wrong. Kederach shemesadrin be'erchen, kach mesadrin be'bal chov, and the brisa. So now what we've seen is that we answered up the Shmuel sugya, that Shmuel is one side of the Tanaim, and Shmuel paskins, and he holds that a shliach bezdin is allowed to take an item from someone that's collateral, provided that it's outside of their home, but not allowed in the home, paskining lakula. And then we saw the rest of this brisa that has these unique things that tell us what not to give as collateral. Omar Mar, 4 lines before the wide lines, 2/3 of the way down, a little bit more. No say mito matzah asher. We said 2 beds, and one of them has to be fancily made up for a rich person. And mito umafatz la'ani. Leman. Who is this for? Who's the second bed for? We already said that it can't be for the man's wife. That's not allowed. He's not allowed to do that. So what is it for? So the Gemara learns a side din from here. A man has to have 2 beds. What are they for? Tarte lamali, first of the long lines. Chada de achilala. Let's remember that we don't eat like they ate. They would lay out splayed on their left side with their elbows supporting them, or with some kind of small piece of furniture supporting them. That's how they would sit. But after they would eat, they'd go lie down. V'chada de zagala. And this is reminiscent of a din, says the Gemara, Kiddush Shmuel, like the Shita of Shmuel. And now we'll get into a kind of Garata-ish type of Gemara, pretty short, but still unique. To Amar Shmuel. Shmuel was a doctor. Kol mili yadana asusaihu. I know how to heal everything. Levar mehanitzlas, with the exception of the following 3 things. Man de achil ahina merira. If a person eats a bitter, they eat a bitter date, aliba rekana, on an empty stomach, he doesn't know how to heal that. Number 2 is uman de asar, someone who ties on themselves misna de kitna, a rope of flax, retiva achartse, that is wet around his waist. We don't even know what the disease is. We just know that if you do that activity, he doesn't know how to heal it. Clearly, the answer is not just take it off. Obviously, something already happened. And then the third one is our case. Uman de achil nama, somebody who ate bread, but velo maske arba garmidi, but didn't take 4 steps before he went to sleep. Rashi, right to our left, 2/3 of the way down, a little bit less than that. Arba garmidi kodem shiyashan. He didn't take 4 steps from his eating of bread till he went to bed. Hilkach. Yavinan le mita shtia. That's why we said he gets a second bed. Umoshiva b'richuk 4 amos mimakom achilaso, and it has to be 4 amos away. V'al korcho yargil la'amod v'laleches b'mishka v'lo yishan al mita she'achal. Another reason, among all the other very good reasons, not to eat in your bed. It's a little depressing, it's very messy, and it makes bugs. So the Gemara has another reason. And Shmuel says they don't even know how to heal this. If a person eats in their bed and they don't walk Dalet Amos, they are bringing some damage upon themselves. And 2/3 of the way down, 4 lines into the wide lines on Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, the Gemara says, Tani Tana Kamei de Rav Nachman. You said something that I don't understand. The Brisa reads, Kederach shemesadrin be'erchen, kach mesadrin bebal chov. This really is a side din. It has nothing to do with our sugya per se, other than it was in the Brisa that we were using as a raya for Shmuel's approach, or really, more honestly, to say there was a machlokas tanaim, Shmuel and one other side. What we had said is that just like we can make adjustments in the world of erchen, we can also make adjustments in the world of the lovet as it relates to his collateral. Amar le. So the question was asked as follows. Rav Nachman said back to the person who taught the Brisa, because it was Tani Tana Kamei de Rav Nachman. Somebody taught a Brisa in front of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman retorted back to the person who said the Brisa. Amar le, hashta zvuni mizavninan le. Once we already know, although we haven't really learned this yet, we saw a remez of it in the Mishnah, but once we know that the malveh, that text is allowed to sell my mashkon, Sidure misadrin le. Now you're telling me that we're going to make adjustments for his payments. We don't have to make adjustments. I can sell the whole thing, says text. I'm the malveh. I'm good to go. Says the Gemara, do we sell that? Is that really right? We have a Mishnah. We have expressly in our Mishnah that when the malveh is holding on to a collateral, the items that are relevant to be used now have to be given back to the loveh for their usage. Therefore, it must be that he's not selling it. Says the Gemara, the Tana who taught this brisa to Rav Nachman, Kerashbag Tana Kameh. He was holding like the Shita of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Let's see what that means. This is really what was being taught to Rav Nachman. Hashta lirashbag zvunim ezavninan le, sidure misadrinan le. Are you telling me, this is what Rav Nachman asked, if according to Rashbag we sell it, what do you mean that we have to give back parts to the loveh? I can sell the whole thing. I'm not giving back parts. Says the Gemara Ditznan. This Mishnah we need. Rashbag Omer Afla Atzmo, even for the malveh, as he tries to give back the item to the loveh, he doesn't have to give back anything for the whole time. Eino machzer ela ad shloshim yom. He only has to give back that pillow and give back the plow for 30 days. Mikan ve'elech mochron bebes. Then he's allowed to sell it, no problem. How do we know that Rashbag meant that when he says Mikan ve'elech mochron bebes, that it's a full sale? Dilma, perhaps we could say that Hachi Ka'amar, 3/4 of the way down, halfway through the wide lines, Ad Shloshim Yom Hadar Le Be'ene, that up until 30 days, says Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, I'm going to give the item back exactly as is. Mikan va'elach, but after that, if I still haven't collected my money, so then, Mehadar Le Lamai Dechazile, I only have to give back a version of what I have as collateral that's fitting for this person. The Rishonim here explain the very unique din, that perhaps, let's say he gives me a car as a collateral. His socioeconomic status is that he should be driving a Camry. The car he gave me as a collateral was a Maserati. So I only have to give him back to Camry and I can keep the difference. That's what, or Tex can keep the difference in this case. Not bad. Yeah. And really, like, I've never driven a Maserati. I can't really comment, but a car is a car. No. Right? Thought so. So then Tex will give me back a Camry's worth of the Maserati that I gave him, and he'll keep the cash difference. Let's say it's a $40,000 difference, a $50,000 difference. All that money can remain with him. Now, Isal Kedaitach, Isle the Rashbag Haisvara, if the Rashbag were to have held of that, Lekamidi de lo Chazile, there's a problem. Rashbag can't say partial payments. Rashbag would never agree. The Tex could give me a Camry's worth of my Maserati. Why not? To Amar Abaye taught us a din, and this idea is found in Maseches Shabbos. We haven't seen this in a while. Rashbag v'Rav Shimon v'Rabbi Shmuel v'Rabbi Akiva kulhu svirluhu. Everyone agrees to the following principle: Kol Yisrael b'nei malachim hein. Halachically speaking, the Jewish people are considered to be b'nei malachim. They're considered to be princes. Even when they're poor, we treat them like they're a prince. So therefore, if Rashbag holds that way, then there's no possible way to understand Rashbag that when Tex returns the collateral to me, to the loveh, he can't take my Maserati, cash it out, and pay me worth a Camry because I'm B'nai Melachim. Even if I'm a pauper, but I'm a Ben Melech, I deserve even a Maserati as a Ben Melech, and therefore there's no way Rashbag held that way. Let's go through all of the Tanaim to see where they hold of these shitas. Rashbag, what does he say? Ditnan. We have a Mishnah. This Mishnah can be found as well in Maseches Shabbos. This is dealing with the halachos of muktzah. Says the Gemara, loes haluf veloes hachardal. These are different types of vegetation. The Tanna Kama held that these were muktzah because they weren't even edible for the average animal. So they were muktzah. Let's see what Rashbag says. Shimon ben Gamliel, matir beluf, mipnei shehu ma'achil le'orvin. The luf is a food that is eaten by a raven. The only people who own ravens are wealthy people. And because there is such a thing as a wealthy person who owns a raven, he's therefore a Ben Melech. And because all Yidden are B'nai Melachim, Rashbag would never agree to giving back because he holds that all Jews are B'nai Melachim. That's how we know from the Rashbag that he holds that all Jews are B'nai Melachim. And similarly, Reb Shimon. How do we know that Reb Shimon holds that all Yidden are B'nai Melachim? Ditnan. We have a Mishnah. This Mishnah can be found in Maseches Shabbos a little earlier than where we saw before. B'nei Melachim sachin shemen vered al gabei makosein b'Shabbos shekein darkan lasuch b'chol. The very wealthy crew in Klal Yisrael, they're allowed to use rose oil on their wounds on Shabbos because they use it casually during the week. This is a very important svara. Let's say that even without a medical issue, you're going to use a liquidy type of oil. Okay, let's say baby oil is a super liquidy type of oil, or perfume. So if the perfume also has as a secondary benefit that is healing, mutter to use, because the Bnei Malachim use it stop. They use it even when there isn't a wound. Then they can even on Shabbos use it for the wound, no problem. There's no isser of tochein, which is our isser by taking medications. Reb Shimon Omer, that's ridiculous. It's not just the wealthy. Kol Yisrael b'nei malachim hein. Even paupers are allowed to use rose oil on Shabbos for wounds, because even though they can't afford it, but all Jews are b'nei malachim. Next, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva. Where do we see from them that they are of the opinion that all Jews are like b'nei malachim? Titania, we have a brisa. Haresha hayu noshen bo elev zuz. If I owe you $1,000, ulevush itztala bas mea mana, and the coat that I'm wearing is worth 10,000 mana. Mafshitin osami menu. The Tanna Kama says that the people who I owe money to will take the coat off of me. Umalbishin oso itztala haruuyalo. My coat that's worth ever so much money. What they're going to do is they're going to take it and then they're going to go to Target and buy me a coat for $40. And the difference in cost is going to be kept by the people to whom I owe money. So says the Gemara, V'tana mishum Rabbi Shmuel, V'tana mishum Rabbi Akiva. No, you cannot do that. Why? Kol Yisrael re'uyin la'osa itzala, because they're all b'nei malachim. Very good. So now, with all of that, basically, we are able to understand the sheet of the Rashbag. The sheet of the Rashbag is that the malveh is allowed to sell the item, not partially sell the item, but fully sell the item. But there was this havamina that we saw within the Rashbag, that perhaps we would say that there is partial payment, only one that is ra'ui for the person. So again, that's the coat from Target instead of the expensive leather coat from whoever sells leather coats. So it says the Gemara, Ulamai the Salikadait and Meikara, 4 lines from the bottom on Kufyud Gimel Amud Beis. According to the Havamina, the Yoivle Mai de Chazile, that the Malveh can give whatever is due to the Loveh based on socioeconomic status, and that text can keep the balance above the Camry, above the coat from Target. I could understand. When it comes to pillows, there are different kinds of pillows. We know that. Go on Amazon right now, you will see pillows worth many hundreds of dollars, and you will see pillows worth a couple of dollars. Massive gap in the culture. In fact, I don't think there's anything in our culture that is sold at one price. Nothing that we can think of. Look at Amazon. Chazile de beni beni. Therefore, if Tex were to give me back the pillow that's deserving to me, he can keep the difference to offset his losses for having lent me money. Ela machrisha, says the Gemara, there really was only one kind of macharisha, of a mill. There was only one. Lemai chazia. And if that's true, how can Tex ever recoup his losses? So says the Gemara, Amar Rava bar Rabba, machrisha de kaspa. They actually had one interchangeable part. The combing part, or the blade, as it were, could have been made out of a nicer metal as opposed to out of a weaker metal. Fine. Lastly, for tonight, the Gemara says, Maskif lo, Rav Chaga, v'lei malei, lav alai karamis. Why is it, says the Gemara, that Tex has to worry about me, the Loveh? I owe him money. I gave him a collateral to offset the losses. Why does he have to worry about giving me a pillow? That's my fault. Why does he have to worry about that? Amar le, the Gemara closes with a beautiful nakuda. Amar le Abaye, Ibra, Rashi, Be'emes, you're 100% right. Ale Karmi, you're right. You're the one who has to take care of Phil. Tex, you have to take care of me. You're the Malve, I'm the Love. Mishum shene'emar, ulecha tiyat tzedakah. This is the din. The din is we should function this way. We should be righteous and kind people. We should be just. We should be trying to take care of other people. It's not just about me. Even in a scenario where where I owe Tex money, he still needs to treat me like a mensch. I told this to one of my kids the other day. right, wrong, or ugly, you cannot treat your parents the way that you just treated them. It is always begeder l'chati tzedakah. You're obligated to be nice. Same thing is true over here. Text is obligated to take care of me to a minimal degree because of the pasuk of l'chati tzedakah. On Shabbos Emir Hashem, I believe Daf Yomi is at 7. We'll pick up on the top of Kufya Dalid Amud Aleph on the second line. Wishing you all a beautiful night.